Sage Wanderer here, and welcome to Coffee Talk! Today, we're talking about the hereafter. Dun dun dun! So, if you believe in the hereafter, then you know what I'm here after. Sorry, it's an old joke. I'm not even sure what it means. So, once again, Coffee Talk is about maybe supernatural things or conspiracy theories or ideas that I find interesting, but I don't necessarily believe in. So it's just a, well, as one person called me, I'm his favorite what-if guy. So Sage is kind of the what-if guy. So let's talk about the afterlife. One thing about life after death is that we don't really know what's going on because nobody's really come back and told us. I mean, people have had near-death experiences, but then there's arguments whether near-death experiences are actually maybe just like lucid dreams, fever coma dreams, and that people aren't really remembering death. But then there's a lot of evidence for life after death, near-death experiences. But we're talking about the hereafter. So we don't really know. It's a great big guessing game. It's probably one of the biggest mysteries of all time. Where do we go when we die? Now, I was raised with the Christian heaven. If you do everything right, if you dot all your I's and you cross all your T's, and you don't drink or smoke or chew or hang around with those that do, they created 3 new commandments for the Baptist and Pentecostals. Don't cuss, don't drink, don't smoke, don't chew, and don't hang around with those that do. They replaced all of the Gospels with that new made-up one, but I won't go there. But the Christian heaven was a bunch of angels dressed in diapers or togas with little cherubim, little fat babies, and they're playing harps, and they're floating around on clouds, and you get your own cloud. That's why, if you're really happy, it's called being on cloud 9. So you get your own cloud, and you get to hang out there, I guess, with the cherubim and jam all day on the harp. And as a kid, I always wondered why everybody was working so hard to get to heaven when it was just hanging out on a cloud with a bunch of baby angels playing harps. And I don't know, it seemed like there must be more to it than that to me. And, as a grown man and a theologian and a person who has studied all world religions and Christianity from one end to the other and back, I still wonder where a lot of these ideas come with the little half-naked baby angels and the harps and the clouds, and I think it must be steeped in paganism. And I should do a study on it, but I can't really find any references to clouds, harps, cherubim, baby angels in togas in the Bible. But pearly gates and streets of gold and all that stuff is there. But so there's clearly a mixture, just like everything else in modern Western mythology to a certain degree. There's this mix of religions, whether it's a mix of Christianity and paganism, or Judaism and Christianity, or Buddhism, and who knows what. But yeah, so speaking of Judaism, though, Jews don't have the same heaven. They don't believe in the pearly gates and the streets of gold, and they don't believe in the angels, the baby angels with the halos and the harps and the clouds. They believe in a thing called Abraham's bosom. And they basically believe that all souls that die go into this place and wait. And they're in this waiting room, this giant waiting room. Kind of reminds me of Beetlejuice. In that there was a waiting room in the afterlife, like a doctor's office, and everybody was bored to death, and all the dead people were waiting there for their turn, right? But in Judaism, that's kind of what heaven and hell is combined into one place, where people sit and wait for the end of times and the return of the Messiah, who then will, I guess, judge the quick and the dead. There is a judgment in Torah beliefs. Hey, I'm not a Jewish scholar. In fact, I reject a lot of the Judaism that's leaked into Christianity. They are 2 separate religions. Let's get real here. But anyway, so there's not like a heaven per se in Judaism, and likewise there's not a hell either, I do believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. If there's any card-carrying, been to Hebrew school Jews out there or rabbis, please feel free to jump in and pepper the comment section with some interesting tidbits about Judaism's version of heaven. So I got some notes here if you're wondering what I'm looking at. But one thing that's kind of clear, and it's a common thread, eventually in all afterlife scenarios, from what I can tell, there is in fact a judgment day. And one of my favorite versions of life after death in a motion picture is a movie called Defending Your Life with Albert Brooks and what's her name? Oh, it's not Faye Dunaway. It's the other one. Meryl Streep. Meryl Streep is in it. And Rip Torn, who plays an afterlife character who's hilarious. Rip Torn is the guy from Men in Black. He's the if you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball kind of guy. He's the same guy. But if you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball. But anyway, it's a funny movie. It's kind of a new age take on the idea of the afterlife. And in the movie Defending Your Life, if you haven't seen it, the synopsis is simple. When you pass away, you go to a resort, an otherworldly resort, where if you were a good person and you did a lot of good things for the world and you weren't an evil crumb, you weren't a scummy person, then you got to stay in a fancy hotel. But if you were like a scummy person in life, you had to go stay in a flea bag motel. And, you know, you could eat all you wanted and not get fat. It was just kind of like it was just a moment where you got to go and rest after life and chill for a minute. But the hook was you were on trial and you had to defend your life. And there was a prosecuting attorney who tried to convict you of being fearful or timid or negative or evil or hurtful. Any of those things could then cause you to not get translated to the next step up as a human or as a being. And in that movie, they talked about being brain size. So humans use only 2 or 3% of their brains, but as you get elevated as an entity, you know, like Rip Torn's character, he's using 60% of his mind. And but in one funny scene, there's a downside to that because Rip Torn won't show up to defend him on one of his court days because Rip Torn had a big brain problem. Because he's a 60%er, he was caught in the inner circle of thought and trapped in a conundrum and couldn't tear loose from his inner mind enough to go to work. So I can relate as a guy with a pretty high IQ that plays 12 instruments. Sometimes I just stare off into space for hours because I'm dissecting some big problem in my brain, and it's like when the computer turns on the little swirly thing, or it used to be an hourglass in the old days. So in Defending Your Life, they played back your past like an immersive 3D experience. So you got to relive that fight with the bully when you were 8. You got to relive that hurtful thing you said to your mother when you were 14, you know, and so it's Judgment Day. It's just another way of displaying Judgment Day. And you'll find Judgment Day, the great white throne judgment is the Christian Judgment Day, where God separates the wheat from the chaff, you know, he separates the sheep from the goats, and people get their eternal reward or their eternal punishment. And Buddhism has some similar things as well. I mean, once again, Judgment Day and a test at the end of life and a decision whether you will go on to some other new greatness or whether you will be punished or, in the case of Buddhists, sent back to earth to learn your lesson again since you didn't learn it the first time. And I kind of dig Buddhism because for no other reason than Buddhism gives you a second chance. It's like if you're a total screw up and you can't get life right at all, and you totally botch everything, and you die, and then they set you straight. Apparently, there's a moment of reprogramming that occurs in Buddhism, where your flaws are pointed out to you. You're given a new prerequisite goal set that you need to achieve in the next life, and then you're sent back to learn it all over again, and you're placed in a position to emphasize those lessons. So let's say that you were a rich person and you had no charity in your heart and you died a greedy, then you might get reincarnated as a poor child whose family is mentally challenged and has to live on sub-poverty wages and is just one step in front of the reaper all the time. So that in future experiences, you'll have more empathy for people who struggle if you struggle in life. So that's kind of the thing behind Buddhism and reincarnation. But their afterlife is interesting because once the first thing that happens is a test. So according to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, when you die, you will be tempted, you will be distracted, you will be entertained in some way to try to prevent you from passing through essentially a spiritual obstacle course to reach enlightenment. So one of the ways that they test whether you learned the lessons in life enough to be translated to the next experience and not sent back to earth again or punished in some way. There's a Hindu Buddhist concept of purgatory where you're sent to the FEMA camp for re-education and spiritual re-education. That's kind of there too, but most of the time it's just they send you back to keep learning because you didn't pass the test. So in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the test for enlightenment, you get tempted by lust or food or battle, combat, war, conflict, and so they're called the 7 enemies or something like that in Buddhism. It's very much like the 7 deadly sins, avarice, greed, lust, gluttony, all of this stuff that holds a soul back and prevents a soul from maturing into what God invented us and created us to be, and what our original intent is. And so we have to overcome those stumbling blocks. And in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, they are represented by demons. There's entities that try to trick you as you pass through this obstacle course, this test to see if you learned enough to be enlightened. And so one might be a room full of beautiful succubus, beautiful women, like imagine strippers on steroids, and you hadn't seen a woman in 10 years, and they're all over you. And if you choose to stay in that moment and live out that fantasy with those entities, then you flunk. You have to be able to have willpower and say no to the sirens, right? Say no to the women. And then the next one is a banquet of food. And you're starving to death, and when you want to eat, but and there's mother type characters that are tempting you to stop and eat their apple pie, and maybe it's even an entity that's pretending to be your own mother. And there's a lot of tales related to experiences of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. People that remember things who didn't get their brain reset when they were reincarnated, and they remember the afterlife. Dun, dun, dun! Well, if you believe in the hereafter, then you know what I'm here after. I still know what that means. So, there's a lot of things in common with the afterlife and that test portion of it and Judgment Day. But the end result of where we go is still kind of vague. Heaven is not really clearly spelled out. I once heard a very convincing prophet who claimed to have spent several days in heaven, and they called it, like, at the center where the throne was and God and all the angels were, was like a city on a hill, right? But then all around it were rolling hills, and the weather was perfect 24/7, and it never got night. It was always daytime. And there were people playing frisbee with their dogs, playing ball with children, people running and playing and picnicking and being human, kissing, holding hands. All this stuff was going on in heaven, and it was like a continuous recreational fun day. It was like field day every day. This person also went into the city and was able to approach the throne room and see all of the pomp and circumstances around the kingdom. And of course, there's an argument that maybe he was seeing the new Jerusalem, the 1,000-year reign on earth, the millennial reign, we were taught to call it. Maybe that's what he was seeing instead of heaven itself. So it's still a lot of vagueness in every religion about heaven, but there is a very clear hell that is taught by certain Christians, and not all Christians believe in a literal burning hell. And there's some I don't know, disinformation or misunderstanding. Let me put it this way. As a theologian, let me assure you that the lake of fire was not made for you. The lake of fire of unending burning, that literal burning fire and brimstone hell, was prepared for Satan and his demons, the leaders of the rebellion against God. They're the ones that get cast into the lake of fire for unending torment. Some theologians believe, that humans who absolutely positively reject God in every way can also be sent there. Catholics believe in a purgatory that's in between. It's a place where you go to get re-educated. It's a spiritual FEMA camp, where you go and you are shown the things that you did wrong, and you're given an opportunity to right those wrongs in your spirit, those shortcomings in your soul that caused you to make mistakes in life. And once you pass through that, then you can go on to your eternal reward and your mansions in heaven. And, Jesus said, I go to prepare a place for you, and in my Father's house there are many rooms. One could say, in my Father's kingdom there are many mansions. That's another way to decipher that. But in other words, we'll all have our own space in or near God, because Jesus went and prepared it for us. But not everybody is worthy of that, and some will fall short, and there's this whole thing with grace, and I don't want to get into a bunch of Christian doctrine here. But there is, in Christianity, a lot of confusion with people who shouldn't be confused, but they are confused mainly by movies and non-biblical interpretations of things. But, hell, the fiery burning hell, is someplace in the future. The hell from Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, the hell where the devil rules and demons torture people's souls, and the devil's in charge, and, well, it's like one of my favorite jokes is based on this kind of false idea of hell. So my favorite hell joke goes like this. A guy dies and goes to hell, and he's greeted by the devil, and he showed some different choices. He's allowed to have choices of his punishment. So in the first room they show him, there's all these people, and they are up to their nose in human feces and raw sewage. And so they are just completely buried up to their nose. And he's like, that is not good. I do not want to spend eternity buried in human feces and just my nose sticking out. And so in the next room they showed him, everybody there was up to their neck, right, in human duty, but they had to stand on their tiptoes and really stretch, because it was deep enough that if they didn't, they'd go completely under. So they had to stand on their tiptoes to keep their head above the pool of human feces. And the guy was like, well, that's a little better, but still, that's just, oh my gosh, this is awful. There's got to be a third choice. So they take him to the third room. In this room, the human feces and raw sewage is only knee deep. And there's all of these people, and they're all standing around, and they're drinking coffee, and they're in knee deep sewage. And the guy goes, well, the 3 rooms, that's standing knee deep in poop drinking coffee is way better than being, eye deep or nose deep or neck deep in human poo-poo. So I'm going to choose this room. I'm going to choose the room where we all stand around and drink coffee in knee-deep sewage. And so he does that. The devil leaves. There's a demon there, overseeing the coffee drinkers. And, they hand him a cup of coffee, and he gets a couple sips of his coffee. And then he's thinking, this isn't too bad. I could probably do this. And but in no time, you hear the demon crack the whip. He cracks the whip, and he tells everybody, all right, coffee breaks over. Back on your heads. It was just a coffee break. Coffee breaks over back on your head. This comes from a book called Dante's Inferno. It comes from, it's the same guy that came up with the hierarchy of angels. And you end up with an idea of a multi-level hell, like a subterranean bunker with many layers. And each layer of hell has a different punishment set aside for a different kind of sinner. And none of that is in the Bible. None of that. It's all from imaginative science fiction of the day. Spiritual science fiction, I'd call it. So you have the lake of fire set aside for Satan and his angels, his fallen angels. You have the bottomless pit, which is a place that I know as an exorcist that demons fear to this day. That is a real place, a place where you're forced to go and wait. And it's very much like a special holding cell in Abraham's bosom, as it were. It's a holding cell for demons. And you can threaten that Michael will come and take them to the pit, and they will scream. You ever want to hear a demon scream? Threaten him with Michael, the archangel, escorting him to the bottomless pit, and you will hear begs for mercy. You will hear demons beg for mercy. If you're into that kind of thing, check out my new series, I Was a Texas Exorcist, which will be coming to you this spring and summer. So, but anyway, so hell is maybe a little less homogenized. Heaven seems to have, and Judgment Day and all that stuff seem to have a common thread that runs through every religion and every ideology. And but one thing that they all have in common, and I've found when searching for truth, that real truth, the solid truth, is where multiple cultures cross, where multiple religions combine to one truth. In other words, it's the things they have in common that are true, and the things that they hold separate from each other that they fight over between the religions are the stuff that's up for debate. But some things are not up for debate. Like all religions pretty much believe that when you die, you will be judged. Your life will be replayed to you. And you will be either rewarded or punished in one form or another for the deeds you commit in this life. And it makes you accountable to God and to the afterlife and to the other humans that came before you. You're accountable for every breath you take, every move you make, every step you take. I'll be watching you. That's God watching you. That's Santa Claus making the naughty nice list, right? So, God is watching, and you will be judged, both the quick and the dead, as one ancient script says. So, anyway, what do you think about the afterlife? You tell me. Do you know that you're going to heaven? Have you ever woken up in fear of hell? When I was a little kid, I kept the phone number to the most holy woman in our church. Every time we had a church, there was always one woman that just never missed a service, and she was usually widowed, and you can't imagine her having an impure thought, and she was, there was always one, so I kept her phone number handy, because if I ever thought I'd been left behind in the rapture, then I would call up the holiest woman I know, and if she answered, I knew I hadn't been left behind. Have you ever been afraid that you would someday have to account for the mistakes you made? And I just thank God for his amazing grace. I am a Christian, and it's the only thing making me able to sleep at night is to know that Jesus has got my back, and thank God he does, because I'm afraid I would get what I deserve. So anyway, are you afraid of judgment? Are you afraid of Judgment Day? Are you an agnostic? Probably not on this channel, but there might be a few. But tell me what you think about life after death. And we'll see you next time. Whoa, wait a minute. I have some coffee. I was talking too much and not drinking enough. One good gulp left. All right, we'll see you next time on Coffee Talk.